Good morning, you guys. It is Tuesday, January 11th. So I'm about 2 days away from the 8-week mark. So I thought it might be kind of fun to change things up today and do a little vlog. So I'm just going to take you along with me on a typical Tuesday in my life, focusing mostly on showing you rehab and how I do everything and how I manage to do it with work. I'm really lucky that I get to work from home during this time. I honestly don't know if this recovery would be possible if I had to go into the office. A lot of people on forums and stuff talk about how they usually take about 2 months off of work, so even short-term leave. But I didn't have to do that because they are letting me work from home during this time. So I want to just kind of show you a typical day. It is kind of midday. It's 10-ish right now. So I'm kind of not halfway, but almost halfway done with my work day. And yeah, so basically, because I work from home and I'm supposed to work about 8 hours a day, I start work early. So I'm supposed to start at 8 and end at 5-ish about, even though that's 9 hours, but anyways. So instead I start at 7 and still end at 5, and then in the middle of the day, with lunch I do my rehab. So I'll show you guys that and how I manage all that. So it kind of just depends on how the day is going and when I have meetings and stuff. But for instance, today I think I'm gonna go downstairs here in 2 hours and do some rehab, and then I will get back to work. Anyways, if this looks different, my scenery, it is because I'm actually at my sister's house in another town because my roommate has COVID. So in order to not get COVID, I'm staying at my sister's house for 2-ish weeks. She is not in town. So I have this ginormous house to myself. So yeah, anyways, I'll see you guys in a minute. I'm about to go take some pills. So I'll show you guys that. And yeah, let's get started with the day. All right, you guys, these are the 2 pills that I'm about to take, and I take more pills than this, but these are the only 2 that I'm going to show you because they're the 2 that pertain to my hip. The other ones are more for my stomach. So I would also normally take a fish oil, but I ran out of my house as fast as I could when I found out my roommate had COVID, so I just didn't grab it because it wasn't in the same spot as these. But anyways, this is just a vitamin C that my doctor recommended I get after surgery. He believes that everyone should pretty much take vitamin C. And then this is a glucosamine joint health supplement. It is called Cosamine ASU for Joint Health Advanced. And that's for obvious reasons because I had surgery on my joint. So yeah, just popping those really quick. And I'm gonna take 2 of these glucosamines and 2 of these vitamin C's. Vitamin C's. Alright, you guys, so I always start out with foam rolling. I start at my feet and I foam roll with a ball. I was doing that while I was working, so I didn't do it again here. And then I foam roll my calves, and then I work my way up my body. I sometimes will do my back before I flip over just because it's easier to do all my backside and then flip over and do the front. So here I'm just going calves, hamstring, glutes, mid back, upper back, and then I will flip over and do my quads. I have connective tissue issues, so I'm not really sure if that plays a role, but if I don't roll out daily, I feel like the stiffest person in the world. So this is a huge part of my daily routine. When I flip over to my quads, I sometimes will do a little bit of a quad stretch, while I'm foam rolling it. I'll basically just find a spot in my quad that is kind of knotted up, and I'll just pull my heel back to my butt and move through that range of motion while the muscle has some resistance to it from the foam roller. And then I have this foam rolling ball that I use for my adductors, and it absolutely kills me. I have it propped up on a little yoga square here to help with putting pressure on it without laying on the ground, if that makes sense. But it is absolutely killer. And then I use that ball to roll my TFL as well. and like the outside of my hip a little bit, even sometimes my glute, depending on how ambitious I'm being that day. So once foam rolling is done and I feel nice and loose, I go into cat cows or cat camels, whatever you want to call them. I just do this every day just because it helps me feel better. I get just an incredibly tight mid back. So I do these, and then I do a little bit of the knee rocks where I rock forward and then back onto my heels. I'm still having some restriction on range of motion with these, so I'm going to keep doing them until I don't have any restriction and it feels normal on my left and right. All right, I don't know what I call this, but this is basically just a back stretch. So I am laying on one side, putting my leg that's facing the ceiling on a foam roller for support, and then relaxing so that I'm not having tension anywhere. And I start with my chest against the wall, and then I open it up to face the ceiling while leaving my hips where they are. And this stretches all the way from my low back into my upper back. Feels so good. I do this every day. If I don't, I highly regret it. It really, really helps. I live by this stretch. Okay, moving on to some calf stretching. I know that this looks incredibly sad. Like, I have absolutely no range of motion in my calves, but I just have really tight calves. I always have. I have compartment syndrome, and I just always had issues with it. And then ever since my ankle surgery, behind my knee has been really troublesome. So both of my calves at this point are like so tight and into my knees, on the bottom of my foot, pretty much everywhere. So I spend a lot of time doing this every day, and it hurts really bad at the beginning, and then they do start to loosen up. So I definitely have to keep this up, especially once I get back to the pitch and I'm taping my ankles and stuff because of that compartment syndrome that I never took care of. All right, so now we're moving into the actual exercises that I have been doing week 7 and 8. This is like a little inchworm action. So basically I start standing up, hamstring stretch down to the ground, walk out to a plank, and then inch my way up to standing again. I know this looks easy, but just with the restriction of my hip flexor, and then as I inch up, that hip flexor becomes shorter and contracted, and then I have to use it to keep bringing my leg up, and that is really challenging for me, but I like it. It's good to do some challenging things. And then I go into a walking quad stretch. So this is challenging on both sides. Definitely balancing on my right leg right now is pretty difficult. And then just stretching that quad and hip flexor. It's really important right now. It's really tight. And then I wanted to show you from a different angle, trying to keep my hips level when I do this and not really lean to that one side. And then I'm just doing a walking knee to chest hug. I obviously have limited range of motion on my right side, but hopefully this will help. This is more of an active range of motion, and before I've always been doing passive range of motion, so this is the first time I'm really using that hip flexor, and boy is she sore. All right, next up we're doing a little walking figure 4. This is the most painful and the most restricted right now for me. I just have really, really limited range of motion on that Faber there, so I'm working on it, but the doctor says that it's just because of the tightening of the capsule after surgery. So it could take a while to get back to normal, maybe even a year or two, but it will naturally get that range back. So I'm just taking it really easy and not forcing anything into a painful range. I just keep it where my body tells me it's okay. So you can see it's not good, but just got to keep working at it. Okay, moving on to the scorpion stretch, or kind of like active dynamic stretch. So you can see I'm basically laying on my stomach with my hands out to the side, and my goal is to touch my foot to my hand out there. I can't quite get there yet, but this is a good stretch for really like your back and your core and your quads and your hip flexor, just kind of everything. All right, now a little bit of muscle activation. Here it's kind of hard to see, but I'm doing kind of a 3-step process. I'm starting by engaging my core, keeping that tight while I engage my glute, and then lifting my leg off the ground about well, kind of as far as I can without extending my back and keeping my core tight, and then holding for 3 seconds and then returning back down. This is a really important part of my exercise because after surgery, your muscle-mind connection can be affected and you need to get that back to have like the base before you start building strength. So this ensures that I get my glutes firing before I go into more complicated strengthening, because I did want to make sure that my glutes are the things that I'm using when I'm supposed to be using them, and I'm not using some other muscle that isn't supposed to be activated. This next exercise you'll see is the same idea. This is a bird dog. So you can see like my back leg, that's the dog part, and then my arms are the bird part. This is another activation movement, but it's activating more muscles here. So we're working on the glute med. We're also working on the core and a little bit of stability there in the leg that stays on the ground. So it's kind of like a full body wake up call to all the muscles. Like, hey, it's go time. For these first 2 activation exercises, I'm just doing 1 set of them just to get that muscle firing. This isn't necessarily like a strengthening exercise. So 1 set is good for now at this stage in my recovery. All right, next I'm doing a hip flexor stretch. I'm doing this first. I don't always do this before I work out. I sometimes do it after, but my hips were really tight this day just from sitting most of the morning doing work. So I am doing it before, and then I'll probably do it after as well. But yeah, I just feel a little bit stiff. So I'm doing a little bit of hip flexor stretching there. Then I'm doing a little bit of adductor stretching here. This is really basic. It looks like I'm almost doing nothing, but I promise you that I'm feeling a stretch in both my adductors here and even my hamstrings, to be honest with you. I'm pretty unflexible. Inflexible? Unflexible. I never know if it's inflexible or unflexible. I think it's unflexible. Same thing here, little hamstring stretch. So difficult for me. Like, I'm literally trying here. This is not abnormal either. This is similar to what I was like before surgery. My hamstrings and glutes and calves and behind my knee are very, very stiff. All right, here is another. This is kind of like my Faber stretch, but it stretches my adductor as well. So this is going to help me get to that figure 4 eventually. Basically a modified butterfly. Here I'm just doing an abductor stretch. So the leg that stays straight and keeps most of the weight on it is the leg that's being stretched. So the one that crosses over is not the one that we are focusing on here. So in this case, I would stay standing on my right leg and the left leg would go across and I would lean over to that left side. All right, and then a little bit of Faber slides. The Faber slides are still really challenging for me. They aggravate my hip flexor a little bit. My hip flexor is definitely struggling in the sense that I don't want to overuse it, but it's also really weak right now. So it's just kind of like this catch-22 where it's like I don't want to strengthen it and use it too much because it's aggravated, but I need to strengthen it because it's weak. Moving on to just a little abduction. This is something that I've had in my program since like almost a day after surgery, but the sets and reps, so the overall volume of it just keeps going up. This is just standing abduction, making sure that my toe is pointed in and I'm leading with my heel. Lots of glute activation here, trying to push my leg behind me instead of letting it come like directly out to the side to make sure that that TFL doesn't kick in. All right, moving on into some strength. Here we're just going to do a 30-second plank, front plank, and keeping everything really tight, core, glutes, quads, everything. I'm jamming out to some music here, you can tell. I'm just jamming out to some music here, trying to keep my mind off it. All right, moving on to a side plank. I do this on both sides for 30 seconds. And then I do a modified side plank with abduction. So you can see I'm on my knees here, side planking, and then that leg that is facing the ceiling, I lift up and I have my hand on my glute here to really activate the right muscles and make sure that that stinking TFL isn't doing the work. Keep that glute working. Do that both sides for 30 seconds as well. And then I move into some glute bridges. I've got 2 bands around my legs here because I didn't have a very heavy one, but ideally I would use a heavy band pretty strong band. But you can see that I am engaging my core, my transverse abdominis, before every single rep, and keeping it engaged throughout so that I can't hyperextend through that low back there. You can see it stays completely straight and I don't overextend my hips really high up to the ceiling. That's something that they still want me to try to avoid because of my dysplasia. So they don't want me to force too much extension at my hips/low back. And then of course, pushing my knees out into those bands the whole time to keep those glutes and hips engaged. All right, moving into another core exercise. This is called the Sarmon abdominal exercise. Pretty much I just make sure that my back is flat on the ground and my core is engaged, and then I lift up my right leg, then my left leg, hold it there for a second, and then I put my legs down to the ground in the same order, so then right, left. I do about 10 of those each side. That is a core movement, but it does ask a little bit of your hip flexor, and my hip flexor is always what ends up feeling first. So yeah, again, hip flexor weak. So it looks like I'm pretty much done with the core for today. Now I am moving into like one last little activation, but it's also a strengthening exercise, but it's just lateral band walks, followed by reverse monster walks to activate some of those muscles we're about to use with some strengthening exercises. Here I am doing a hip flexor movement, just imitating like a run. So I'm putting my leg back behind me and then bringing it up in front of me like I would when I was running or accelerating. But it honestly hurts quite a lot. So I talked to my PT after this, and I have taken this out of my routine now because my hip flexor is really irritated and needs a little rest. Okay, so here we're just gonna do like a three-way slides is what we're going to call these. So I am keeping the leg that's on the ground that's not moving at a slight bend and keeping my glute engaged so that I don't fall into my hip there, but I keep it nice and strong. And then I'm just tapping my foot out in front and then back at a 45-degree angle and then across behind my leg at a 45-degree angle. The focus here is really to not dip and fall into that hip there, but rather keep that glute on and strong so that your body doesn't just sink into the side. You can see I'm tapping my glute to make sure that that puppy knows what he needs to do. I really like this exercise. It helps with balance as well. You can see my little dance. I'm happy about it. Doing my little dance. All right, we have graduated, ladies and gentlemen, to a little bit of weight. I believe I'm holding 8 pounds in each hand, and I'm just doing a little bit of modified deadlifts. Obviously, I'm not grabbing the weight from the ground every rep, but I'm going to like mid-shin and just doing a really basic double leg deadlift. Making sure I keep my core on this whole time, focusing on pulling through my glutes, getting a nice good hamstring stretch in. Then I'm going to add a band around my shins, right below my knees, and I'm going to grab that weight again and then just do squats. These are not going to be quite to parallel, but just above. Whenever I start to feel a pinch in my hip flexor is when I'm supposed to go back up. I'm really sitting back in these as much as possible to get those glutes and hamstrings going. With these squats, I'm really focusing on pressing out into that band and keeping kind of like my hips and my glutes engaged the whole time. Okay, so for my midday workout, that's kind of all the strength I'm doing, and then I'm going to end with a couple stretches. This is a Faber stretch, same thing as like the figure 4, but I need a lot of work on it, so I'm doing extra stretching on it after I'm done with everything. And then I'm going to do another adductor stretch. This is just like a kneeling one. I can move the angle of my leg a couple different ways to hit different areas of my adductor, which I really like, because if you just do the butterfly, you're kind of only hitting one area. And that's it for my midday kind of PT session that I do by myself. And then the second one of the day is either at the gym by myself or sometimes I go to PT. All right, you guys. So that was a typical midday PT session for me. I have to go pretty quick. Like I have to get it done in like less than an hour, which doesn't seem that hard, but actually it is. There's a lot of exercises. I think right now it's not that hard, but as my sets get more, so like right now I only have 1 to 2 sets per exercise, but once I get to like 3 and 4, then it's going to get a lot more difficult to squeeze in. But I basically do a lot of the boring stuff here, and then after work tonight I go to the gym and I do like a 20-minute bike workout. I usually do like 1-to-1, like 1 minute working, 1 minute resting for 20 minutes. Sometimes I get like overly tired, and depending on just like how I'm feeling that day, I might bump it like down to 1 minute working, 2 minutes resting, or 30 seconds working, 1 minute resting. It's like a 1-to-2 ratio. And then after that, I do a little bit more of like, I guess what I do at the gym is a little bit more like whatever I feel like I need to work on. So I don't typically go through like everything. I don't like look at the app, and I don't like do exactly what I'm told, I guess. I just do what I feel needs work. So I'll always do a little bit of mobility, and then I'll do all the stretches because that's like a hard thing that isn't coming very easily to me. And then as far as strength, like I'll focus on what I think needs help. So it's usually glutes and then core, and then at the end of every gym session I usually do a leg extension, seated hamstring curl, and depending on the gym I'm at, I do a leg press depending on if I can do it or not. And I'll try to film that. I'm currently not at my like home gym, so I don't really feel that comfortable filming, but I'll ask, and then if they say yes, then I will. Oh my gosh, I don't have a necklace on. Did you see me try to grab my necklace? It felt so weird. If they don't let me film, then I will try to film when I get back to my home gym and squeeze it in because they don't mind. Sorry about the noise. I'm in the basement and something over there is making noise. But anyways, that's a typical little session. Hello, my babies. It's so stinking late. I'm pissed off. All right, I just got to the gym. I'm about to go film for you, but I'm gonna film what I was supposed to film that one day that we did vlog style. So we are back to vlog style, and this is my nighttime session. So I'm gonna do kind of like my cardio session on the bike, and then I'm gonna do some glute work, some core work, 2 glute exercises, 2 core exercises. Then I'm gonna do leg extension and hamstring curl. For hamstring curl, leg extension, everything's kind of straightforward. There's really nothing I have to modify. I just have to make sure that my core is always engaged when I do anything. It helps my hip flexor not have a roll, and I want my hip flexor to not get overused. So making sure my core is tight on all those. Of course, if I feel any pain, stop. And then for the glutes, I did a glute bridge march. So basically I just bridge up into a glute bridge with both legs, and then I lift up one leg, trying to keep everything like really even and strict and not let any of my hips dip or anything like that. And then I just alternate legs and continue to do that. I usually do about 8 to 10 reps per side before I start to fatigue. And then this Swiss ball hip hike plus, I guess you would call it like a airplane rotation. That's also for your glutes. It really doesn't look like I'm doing much in the video, to be honest, but it's just like this subtle exercise where I'm supposed to be working my glute med and helping with the small rotator muscles. So it's basically I do 10 hip hikes, and then on my last hip hike I fall into like basically an RDL, and then I keep pressure against that Swiss ball the whole time. Then I rotate my hip up to the ceiling about 10 times, and it's really difficult. This is one of my most difficult exercises, and it hurts a lot in the end, to be honest. And then for my core, I am just doing an anti-rotation press out. It's fine as long as I don't go too hard or too heavy when my right leg is like the stability leg. And then I'm also doing like a reverse lunge, kind of like it's like a opposite wood chop. So I'm rotating up, like I'm pulling a sword up from my hip after I lunge back. You understand, you see it. Lunge and then stand up straight using that outside leg for stability. And then I move slow on the eccentric part back down into the reverse lunge. and a little bit more explosive on the way up. Anyways, I'm gonna get in there and go do this dang thing, and I'll catch you guys in a minute. Bye. Okay, I'm trying to get light on my face from the lights like in the parking lot, but I don't know if it's working because now I feel really awkward, like I'm leaning forward a ton, but we're just gonna make it work. Okay, so let's adjust a little. Okay, down here, I'm down here. All right, this is gonna work. It doesn't look good though. Shoot. All right, one moment. Okay, and we are back, and I think this is gonna work. So, I just got out of the gym. You guys will have just watched what I did, but I just wanted to talk to you really quick about like what I'm feeling when I'm doing some of those things. So right now, my hip flexor is really sore. It feels like a mixture of like weak and also irritated. So it's like really hard to tell if I should like strengthen it or if I should give it rest, you know? Like it needs to get stronger, but it's also irritated. So I'm trying to figure out what to do with that. Right now my PT is just saying to like rest a little bit and don't overstretch it. But when I do the Swiss ball hip hikes and like airplane hip open thingies, my hip flexor hurts pretty bad after, and also just kind of like my whole hip joint, but mostly my hip flexor. The only time I have pinching in my hip is if I go too far on like a lunge or a squat. And then as far as like core stuff goes, I get a little bit of like a tweak in my hip flexor sometimes if like on anti-rotations or like the little like dead bug type things. If I like go too hard or too many reps or too long or too much resistance, but if I'm just kind of staying in like a good comfort zone, then everything like feels right. I just need to like find this happy medium between like doing things, like getting to the gym and doing the things, but not overdoing them. And I've always had a hard time with that like my whole life. So once I'm like let loose and told that I can like do a squat or do a lunge or whatever, I just like go crazy and then I do them all. But I kept thinking my AMP app was wrong because it was only telling me to do one set of things. And then I asked and they were like, yeah, that's right. You're only allowed to do one set of them. And I'm like, okay. So I'm about to head home and you can't see me. Why can't you see me? Can you see me better? Okay, so I'm about to head home and warm up some dinner. I have leftover salmon and Brussels and zucchini from last night. So I'm just gonna warm that up because it's honestly really late and I hate eating this late. So the salmon and Brussels without like really any grains and stuff like that is just because I'm trying to eat as anti-inflammatory as possible, which means like no processed food, sugars, gluten, dairy, soy, corn, and also coffee and caffeine and alcohol and stuff. But I have to drink coffee, so I have to try to be like as strict as possible in certain areas because I have to drink coffee because of a bowel situation I have. So I will check in with you for my before bedtime stretch and maybe circumduction if I get lucky and my boyfriend decides to be nice to me tonight. All right, peace. Okay, really quick. So tomorrow is 8 weeks and I just ran up these stairs. Cade was like, I don't know what I was doing. I was just like joking around and he like fake chased me for a second and I ran up the stairs. So just wanted to mention that. You know, like my adrenaline kicked in and I was just like, I'm scared. And when I got to the top of the stairs, I was like, I just ran up those. Like, I'm not supposed to run. Anyways, didn't really hurt anything. There's been a couple things that have like kind of hurt it. I slipped on the ice the other day and it like hurt in the moment, but then a couple minutes later I was fine. And some things at PT of course hurt, but in general, I just have that locking, popping type of like stuck sensation happening. And other than that, things are pretty good. Yeah, I don't have like a ton of complaints other than just feeling like it gets stuck sometimes. And then when I put weight on it in that situation, it hurts a lot, like a lot. And then it like pops sometimes. and then that's almost relieving. I hope you guys enjoyed some of that PT and it helps you with ideas of what you could be doing. I have my follow-up in Vail with the doctors in a week, so I'll be updating you on that. But for now, it's just kind of like a grind every day, just getting after it and trying to stay consistent and not have days where I'm just like, I don't really want to do it, even though those definitely come, and try not to get frustrated with how slow it's been. But I can't think of much else to tell you, so I'll leave it at that, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!